Hi, my name is Moriah COF, and my topic is a vegetarian diet. And my major claim is that a vegetarian diet has zero benefits over a regular balanced diet. And my secondary claims are that one, a vegetarian diet is problematic because it lacks key nutrients that animal products already naturally have. Two, that vegetarians are more susceptible to diseases and health issues. And three, that a meat-eating diet in moderation is safe for your health. So a vegetarian is a person who does not eat meat, someone whose diet consists wholly of vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, and sometimes eggs or dairy products. And a balanced diet is a diet that contains the proper portions of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water necessary to maintain good health. So my first secondary claim is that a vegetarian diet is problematic because it lacks key nutrients. So a vegan diet, which is a subgroup of the vegetarian diet, eliminates all food relating to animal products. And this means that it eliminates natural food sources of the vitamin B12, and this vitamin is important because it helps make red blood cells, nerves, DNA, and carry out other functions. And the vitamin B12 actually can be made by the body, and it's found almost exclusively in animal products. So again, vegans will have to go out of their way to get this vitamin and take supplements, vitamin-rich cereals, and fortified soy products. And vegan diets are also high in folate, and this is important because this vitamin actually masks the B12 deficiency, and a severe B12 deficiency can lead to depression, paranoia, memory loss, delusions, incontinence, and loss of taste and smell. And in an article by the Mayo Clinic, it describes a lacto-vegetarian diet as a diet that eliminates meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and dairy products. So it eliminates milk products. So milk and dairy products are important because they're actually very high in calcium, and vitamin D is actually added into cow's milk, so which it aids in bone health. So without enough fortified food and limited sun exposure, vegans may need to again take supplements, and diets that also exclude fish and eggs lack key nutrients. So they are low in active forms of the omega-3 fatty acid, and again they would have to probably take supplements if they need to get that. And then my second claim is that vegetarians are more susceptible to diseases and health issues. So diets that exclude fish and eggs or sea vegetables like seaweed lack EPA and DHA, which are forms of the omega-3 fatty acid. And these are important because they help in cardiovascular health and eye and brain functions. And vegetarians and vegans are actually have been found to have lower blood concentrations of EPA and DHA. And the omega-3 deficiency can cause rough and scaly skin and dermatitis. And so next is the proteins. Proteins are an important part of our diet, and Mary Hansen, a registered dietitian, claims that 12 to 20% of your total daily calories should be proteins. And instead of animal-based proteins, vegetarians substitute these with plant-based proteins. So animal proteins actually contain every essential amino acid for humans that we need. And most plant-based proteins lack these, so vegetarians will again have to find these in specialized foods or supplements. And I say all this to say that vegans actually supplement their proteins with legumes, and in an Adventist health study, legumes have actually been found to be negatively associated with the risk of colon cancer. And lastly, inadequate protein and low calcium intake are associated with bone loss and fracture in the hip and spine of the elderly. So in a study focusing mainly on Asian postmenopausal women, showed significantly lower spine and hip BDM in vegans. And in an article by Harvard Medical School says, in the EPIC Oxford study, 75% of vegans got less than the recommended daily amount of calcium, and vegans in general had a relatively high rate of fractures. So this leads to my last point, that a meat-eating diet in moderation is safe for your health, because a lot of people will say that red meat is actually bad and it can cause cancer and all those types of things, but there are actually benefits to low-fat meat. So one of the benefits is that eating meat lowers the risk of IDA, which is iron deficiency anemia. And in a Saudi Arabia medical journal, an experiment testing the link between red meat consumption and the accumulation of anemia in women of childbearing age showed patients consuming less than 2 servings of red meat and vegetable were actually at a high risk for anemia. And here are some other meat-eating risks that have been debunked. So in an academic journal discussing the possibilities of meat being a part of a healthy diet shows that a high glycemic index diets are associated with insulin resistance, which is impaired response of the body to insulin, which leads to high levels of glucose in the body, and this is a key factor in type 2 diabetes. And red meat has actually been found to have a low glycemic index. And in a study by Costani, Tron, and Lee, they found that diets high in energy, saturated fat, and glycemic carbohydrates and low fatty acids are actually linked to colon cancer, but low fat meats have not been linked to colon cancer. And in a recent study, it's been found that moderate consumption of red meat does not contribute to prostate cancer. And in a nutritional research review by Margaret Thurgood, a member of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, she found that meat eaters actually had a low SMR of 54, which is a standardized mortality ratio. And a German vegetarian study reanalyzed her data, and they categorized people between strict vegetarians who eat no meat and fish and moderate vegetarians who ate meat and fish occasionally. And the study actually found that the moderate group had a lower rate of total mortality than the strict group. And lastly, in a cross-sectional survey of participants in a health food shop user study, found no difference in blood pressure between meat eaters and vegetarians. And all this to say is because tests involving the vegetarian diet relating to lowering blood pressure has been found inclusive. And in conclusion, the vegetarian diet lacks key nutrients that animals contain, and because of key nutrients that are lacking in the vegetarian diet, vegetarians are more susceptible to diseases and health issues. And lastly, a meat-eating diet in moderation is safe for your health.
Okay, well, the proposition's very clearly stated at the beginning. I think you should do a little bit of background so that we know why it is we're listening to this argument. Is there a trend toward vegetarianism? Are vegetarians been aggressively attacking meat eating as a issue and so it needs to be defended? Why is it that this seems like it's worth spending some time and energy on it? Why is it problematic? The contents of the speech are previewed pretty quickly and efficiently. That's fine. Like I said, the controversy just seems a little underwhelming. You define vegetarianism and also what a balanced diet are. That's perfectly fine, and it's in an appropriate place in the argument, so that's okay. The three secondary points that you labeled, I thought that you did a good job signposting each of them as you got to them, and they are phrased as claims, so that part works pretty well. I do think that there's a little bit of assumption on the information on the first point that needs to be documented more. I know that you got information from someplace, but you're not citing it in the presentation, and that's a little bit of a problem. The deficiencies of vitamin D, the need for vitamin B12, and the fact that it's only found in meat products, and that the other thing kind of masks the effect of this. And then you've got a whole list of maladies that are associated with it. I don't know where any of that came from. I assume that you did some research and that that's part of your argument, so you need to tell us where it comes from as part of the justification there. I thought you were a little bit better on the second and the third point, so doing that, providing us with the information on those points. There's a good argument about bone loss as a minor point under your second point. I thought that you did a pretty good example of that. The notion that legumes are potentially problematic, I think, is an important argument, but it gets a little underdeveloped. And let's face it, the notion that these particular kinds of nutrients are essential to somebody's health, again, the link to harms is a little bit presumed instead of demonstrated. The third point, I think that basically it's a rebuttal point where you're suggesting that the challenges that vegetarians make against meat are really off the mark, that there's good reason to believe that it's perfectly safe if it's consumed in a balanced manner. And I think you do a good job on that. I did kind of like this might have been a good place to maybe do the contrast where the suggestion is that meat is associated with cancer, and you can go back and say, and the thing that they're replacing it with, we know is associated with a particular cancer, as I said on the second point. So there's a little bit of a reason to carry over that information. Like I said, I think there's a lot of information in the speech, just a little inconsistency on citing the sources, especially on the first point. You do depend on, there's a lot to cover in your presentation. You're reading a lot, you're reading fast, and so you have a tendency not to kind of engage us a little bit as a speaker. So whatever credibility you're getting is not going to be from the delivery issues, it's going to be from the information that you have. So that's another reason to make sure that you give us the source citations. All right, thank you.